Hello, I'm Jeremy, and today I'm going to be talking about Whale Riders. This is a family game designed by Reiner Knizia, put out by Grail Games, and it plays in about 30 to 40 minutes for 2 to 6 players. The box says ages 8 and up. I believe an 8-year-old would be able to handle this game perfectly well. And it is a set collection game that has players racing across a map to collect tiles to fulfill contracts. This is a real gem of a game if you're looking for a family weight game. I'll take a few minutes to show you how it plays, and then I'll come back and give you some extended thoughts on it. So I've set up here a 2-player game of Whale Riders, and the game does play from 2 to 6 with no real changes in the setup except for the number of tiles that are in the bag. And each player is going to get at the start of the game 3 coins as well as 3 cards and a pawn, which will start on this starting space. This shows a little figure which is riding a whale. These guys are going to go out on a hunt, I suppose, and collect these various resources, and then once they reach the far port down here, they will return back home and collect these pearls. Pearls are victory points in this game, and once all the pearls are gone from this home port, the game will end, but they can't be taken until a player has basically done the whole lap of the game board. So at the start of the game, like I said, each player is going to get 3 cards, 3 coins, and those cards are going to be of 3 different types. They will show either a specific set of goods, which will be required to complete the card. Those will be pictured on the tiles that you collect. They will show a number of goods, so any 4 goods would satisfy this card, or they'll show a number of tiles, so any 5 tiles would satisfy this card. And on the player's turn, what they're going to do is pretty simple. They're just going to do 2 actions, and they have a number of actions that they could pick from, and any of those actions they could do twice on a given turn if they so choose. The first action that they could do is simply take 1 extra coin. That is because the coins are required to gather these goods. Second action is to move their pawn 1 space forward. Could only basically ever move in one direction. It'll just move forward over the course of the game until it reaches here. Then it'll flip around and it'll move back. Once you reach the home port, after going across the board, you won't be able to do the move action anymore. The third action that you could do is you can buy a tile from the port where your figure is. So this player here would have access to these 4 tiles, and they cost 0, 1, 2, and 3. So this player could take this one for free, and if they wanted to, on a second action, pay 1 money, they would be able to take that tile and basically pay the money back to the bank. After a player's turn, what will happen is any tiles that were in the market where they purchased from will slide down, and then 2 new tiles will be drawn and put out onto the board. These tiles, which come out over the course of the game, none of them will start out on the board. These storm tiles will essentially never get bought by a player. They'll just permanently kill a purchasing slot from a board. So once this one gets bought, and this one gets bought, and this one gets bought, this one will eventually make its way down. There won't be any more free tiles available at that port. And that will apply for all players. All players can move onto the same space, buy from the same port, and it'll just keep refilling. But eventually these tiles will come out and block the port. So the options will get limited, so players will have to continue to press forward. So on these tiles, like I said, there are the 4 basic good types which are shown on the card. So actually, here's a card that shows the 4 basic good types. There are pearls, which are just straight up victory points. This is 2 points at the end of the game if you buy that tile. And then there are wild resources. So these come in quantities of 1 and 2. Here's a 2-1. The only restriction with these is if I was going to spend this tile, these would both have to be the same resource when I spent that tile. So, like I was saying, on your turn, the actions are take a coin, move your pawn, buy a tile. Third thing that you could do, or fourth thing, I guess, is that you could discard any number of cards if you want. If you just don't like the cards that you have in your hand, you could discard them. And then the fourth thing that you could do is you could complete any number of cards using the tiles that you've collected. So if I had, for example, 10 goods on tiles, I would simply pay those tiles with the 10 goods back to the box. They wouldn't go back in the bag. And then I would get to put this in my scoring pile, so it would be worth 5 points at the end of the game, and I would immediately get 4 coins. So for one action, you could complete any number of cards that you have the tiles to do, but you need the liquidity generally to buy more tiles. So there's some tension in that, whether or not you can afford to wait until you can complete all of your cards at once, or if you simply want to get more cards in your hand by completing if I have those goods to complete these two, maybe I want to do that early so I could draw 2 new cards so I can figure out what I need to go for next. Also, getting the money to be able to buy more tiles is important, since you only start with 3 money, and taking an action to get $1 is a relatively weak action. So there's some strategy involved in the game. So at the end of your turn, once you've done your 2 actions, the marker will refill as I've shown, and you'll draw up to 3 cards if you've either discarded cards or used cards to complete an action. Or to complete a contract, rather. So that's pretty much how the game is going to play. So you're just going to do all of those actions until, like I said, a player gets back here. And once 1 or more players are back here, they'll have the option to spend money to buy these pearls. And again, this is just basically straight victory points. And the other players may still be down here completing contracts, and that might actually be more lucrative depending on what cards they have. But once the last one of these is bought, the game's going to end immediately, and then players are going to tally up all the pearls that they have, whether they are on tiles or they are on cards. Whoever has the most points is going to win. I will mention that the game does come with 2 small expansions. The first one is a series of goal cards. You would just take 4 of these and put them out, and they would be first come, first serve goals. So for example, the first person to collect 8 tiles would get 2 money, or the first person to reach the end space on the line would get 2 victory points at the end of the game. So you would just randomly pick 4 of those and put those out. The other expansion that's in the game is just a special power. So in reverse player order, a player will be able to draft one of these tiles, and it would give them a unique ability. So this one, for example, would let a player on their turn do 1 free movement. This one would turn that take 1 coin action into take 2 coin actions, and so on. This one, for example, if you buy from a market, if there's a single icon tile in that market besides the one that you bought, you could take that one for free. So some really interesting little powers considering the light rules of the game. But that is basically how you're going to be playing Whale Riders. Alright, so that is Whale Riders, and as you can see, the game is quite a looker. It has really terrific artwork by Vincent Dutrait, like the other Grail Games published Knizia games that have come out in the last few years. And the iconography is really clear. The game is really simple in terms of rules, but the art definitely does not in any way detract from the playability. I should mention that I recently saw that Grail Games is not planning on republishing any of their Knizia titles, so this game, if you think that it looks like something you would enjoy, I would encourage you to go out and buy that before it becomes hard to obtain. The game, I will say, for me, is a really worthwhile addition to my library. The game plays between 2 and 6 players. I haven't played it with a full contingent of 6 players, but it does scale well among the lower player counts I've played it at, and I don't see any reason why it won't work well with 6. You might just get fewer contracts over the course of the game. So what I will say for the game is that it does remind me of a Knizia design that came out from last year by the name of Sumatra that had a similar mechanism where players had a shared market of tiles that they were trying to collect and add to their display. But here each player has their own individual pawn, and any player could take from the market where their own pawn is, whereas there was a bit of a shared incentive. Each player had to pick from the same marketplaces in Sumatra, and it was just determined when the group as a whole would move forward. So slightly different, and that one had more raw style scoring, whereas this one has just collect tiles to complete contracts. It's a little bit more traditional scoring in this game, but the games certainly feel like they're cut from the same cloth. And I would say that Whale Riders to me feels like the cleaner design, the one that I enjoy more. That's partially because everything's much more obvious from the start in terms of your goals, and I think for a family weight game that makes a lot of sense that you would want that, whereas some of the scoring rules require explanation in the other game. But the other thing that I would say about this game is that even though you're only doing 2 actions on your turn, and they're very simple actions, take a coin, take a tile, or buy a tile, complete some cards, or discard some cards and draw some new cards, or move your pawn, right? You have these very constrained decisions, but within that, there's definite tension about whether another player is going to leap ahead and cause the end of the game. A lot of these Knizia games have a lot of interaction because they use these shared mechanisms, such as players determining how long the game's going to last, or other players buying tiles out from the market where you're intending to buy. But there are repercussions for racing ahead to grab a juicy tile. You just can't move backwards until you've gone all the way to the edge of the board and back. So the way that the game layers on complications to your very simple decisions that you're going to be making each turn does feel really rewarding, especially in a game that only lasts, with 2 players, probably 20 minutes, with 4 players, maybe more like 30-35 minutes. One thing I'll note is that the game does come with a little tile bag that is kind of too small, which that is a little bit of an annoyance. I had to dump, for the setup part of the game, I dumped the tiles into the box lid, and then I put the remaining tiles into the bag, and then it's pretty workable, but it's still pretty tight. Certainly doesn't really work well with all of the tiles in the bag, but you could use another bag, certainly, or just the box lid. And I think that would work fine. It's definitely not a deal breaker in what is a really enjoyable game. The other thing that I'll talk about in terms of the gameplay of the game is just that this doesn't. A lot of Knizia games do feel like other Knizia games. I certainly compared this to Sumatra, but I can't think of another one that uses this exact set of mechanisms, and it does feel pretty fresh. I should mention also there is a Whale Riders card game which came out at the same time. That does just implement an older game by the name of Trendy, which is it's a nice 10-minute filler game, maybe 15 minutes. But it's pretty distinctly different from this one. So I would definitely say you want the Whale Riders board game versus the Whale Riders card game. Trendy's fine, it's okay, but this feels like one of the better medium or light to medium family weight games that's come out in the last year or so, and it's one that I think people will continue to play. It's just so straightforward in terms of what you're trying to accomplish, but there's enough player interaction for it to always feel engaging, and the tight economy of your actions and also the money that you have is pretty engaging. One thing that I don't think I mentioned is that at the end of the game your money has no value, so there's a lot of incentive to play as lean and mean as possible, and that again makes it feel more strategic than it otherwise might, because the game, like I said, is a very rules-light game. So it straddles that line, I think, where it might be a perfectly good filler game for more advanced gamers, and light family weight gamers would still get enjoyment out of it. So those are my thoughts on Whale Riders, and thank you for watching.